So Evie Brooks' Marooned in Manhattan is my first book for children and the first book in the series. And I've been doing a lot of school visits lately, and sometimes some of the kids, some of the students start talking about macaroons, and they wonder if those kind of little biscuit pastry things are in the book. And I was like, what? And then I realized that some of the kids were confusing marooned and macaroons. So unfortunately there are no macaroons in my book. Marooned basically means stuck or trapped, And I'm going to read a little bit of the first chapter. I think I should warn you that it's supposed to be a kind of humorous book, except for the first chapter. The first chapter is quite sad. I love opening my book because on the very first page I have a dedication. And when I was a kid, I said to my twin sister, when I grow up, I'm going to publish a book one day. And she was like, yeah, right. And so when I open my book, I see my dedication from my best friend, my twin sister, Claire Gollwitzer. She married this German. And so I feel good about that. And I also feel a bit, I told you, Okay. So here we go. Chapter 1. I am an orphan. That should mean I have magical powers, or a fabulously wealthy grandfather who owns a circus or a 5-star hotel in Morocco. At the very least, I should have a destined to be a star singing voice. Fat chance. In fact, my singing is so hideous that one of my teachers instructed me to whisper the words during choir practice because I was throwing all of the other kids off key. It was Mrs. Scanlon's idea that I keep a journal, but I only write in it when I feel like it. She's the child psychologist I had to visit every week when Mum got sick. Mum meant well, but when you are made to see a therapist, it is blindingly obvious that things are about to get so much worse. Mrs. Scanlon had very long, scraggly grey hair, a face like a badger, a kind badger, and an interesting preference for multicolored gypsy skirts. Practically, the very first thing she asked me was, "How do you feel about your mum being sick?" "Bad," I said, my mouth falling slightly open in amazement. To think, poor Mum forked out loads of cash we didn't have just so that I could spend 45 minutes every week humouring Mrs. Scanlon and assembling puzzles intended for kids half my age. My mum died 7 weeks and 2 days after the first session, so I didn't have to go see Mrs. Scanlon anymore. I almost miss her. Soon after Mum went into the hospital for the last time, she told me I would be leaving Ireland to live with her brother, my Uncle Scott, in New York. That floored me, and I thought, no way. But what kind of person would fight with their dying mother? I kept my mouth firmly shut, which wasn't an easy thing to do. I didn't know my Uncle Scott, but that wasn't his fault. Every time we planned to visit him in New York, something would happen, like Mum would unexpectedly get a new part in a play. Well, that's not completely accurate. Scott did send us the money for the plane fares twice, but we couldn't resist spending it on other things, like a drum kit for me and highlights and burgundy cowboy boots for Mum. Scott came to Dublin to say goodbye to her, and he stayed on for her funeral. He has the exact same coloring as she did. Dirty blonde hair, minus her highlights, and eyes so intensely blue that everyone stares at him for a few extra seconds when they first meet him. He is much taller than she was, and has the kind of skin that suggests he just got back from a fortnight in the Canaries. Mum often said that Scott was born cool, but until I met him, I figured she just said that because he's her older brother. He's not a loud American at all. He must have noticed that I avoided him as much as possible, but he didn't ask me any stupid questions or trying to pretend that everything was normal and okay. And he said that calling him just Scott without the uncle part was fine. I'm going to skip over the funeral part because I can't bear to write about it just now. Maybe later. Maybe never. The morning after the funeral, Scott and I wandered around the flat on North Great Georgia Street in Dublin, bumping into each other and saying, sorry. It didn't feel like home anymore with Mum gone. I tried to figure out how to tell Scott that I had no intention of heading off to America with him. I wanted to stay in Ireland, where I belonged. I wanted to live with my godmother, my mum's best friend Janet. But no clever ideas came into my head. They never do when you need them. So finally, I just blurted out, I'm sorry. I don't want to sound mean or ungrateful, but I'm not going with you to New York. I'm staying here with Janet. It's kind of the whole point of having a godparent. That's the person who brings you up, if something happens. Scott sat down beside me on our ugly brown sofa that sags in the middle, but not too close. He ran his hand through his hair quickly so that it stood up in spikes. Evie, he said, I'm not a military dictator from some banana republic. I'd never force you into going anywhere you didn't want to go. But I think that you would like New York if you gave it a chance. Your mom wanted you to live with me. She says so in her will. She made me your guardian. A guardian is basically a chief godparent. I didn't have a clue how to respond to that. First, I'm not sure what a banana republic is. Second, it was pretty clever of Scott to drag Mum into the conversation. It didn't feel right in my stomach to be defying her wishes. But I couldn't believe that he really wanted me. He's 36. He's not married. He doesn't have any kids of his own. Scott, I said, I don't want to cramp your style by going to live with you. Style? I don't have a style, Scott said, and you won't be cramping anything, or family. I pretended to watch TV, even though the volume was turned down way too low to hear. Scott continued, Evie, you don't have to come straight away. You can stay with Janet until the end of the month so you can finish out the school year and be with your friends. Then you can come visit me for the summer, just for the summer. If you don't like it, you can come back to Ireland in September. I felt suspicious. When an adult says something that sounds fair and reasonable, there's usually a catch of some kind. I didn't want to trust Scott, but I wasn't feeling overwhelmed with options. My savings amounted to €57 and some change. I didn't have anything useful like a credit card or any living relatives that I knew of other than Scott. I wouldn't even be 13 for another 9 months. The police don't allow 12-year-olds to live by themselves, and even if they did, I'd be way too scared to live alone. Okay, I said in a little voice, and Scott whipped around to face me. Just until September, I added a little louder.